All right, we're live.
All right. Good evening. January 5th, 2026. Happy New Year to everyone. And this show is an update on a show I did probably about 3 months ago with Zara Northover. And joining me as my co-host this evening is allanlengel, Deadline Detroit, Washington Post, Detroit News fame, as well as an award-winning writer. So happy New Year and welcome everyone.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Happy New
So
Year.
I'll start off with you, Zara. I will give you the platform to give an update, and then after you give an update on your case, well, update and remind the viewers about your case, and we will go from there with regards to the questions.
Thank you and Happy New Year. My phone was on mute. My thing was on mute before. So my name is Zara Northover. First and foremost, thank you, Alan and Eric, for creating a platform and allowing me to be on your platform. I was reflecting a bit just before getting on this call. And I was just thinking to myself, it's not too many people that are even willing to open up their platform to talk about this. Like, not many people take on Rocket, Mortgage, or be willing to have that conversation about, this situation. So I really do respect you both and appreciate you both for allowing me to share my story and to put my truth out there and, for others to be able to hear, because I see it more as an educational opportunity because most people don't talk about these types of things. Employment law matters. So that'll lead me into what's going on. So my name is Zara Northover. I am a pro se litigant, which is a self-representing litigant against Rocket Mortgage, William Banfield and Rocket Mortgage, and in a retaliation lawsuit that is before the Michigan Supreme Court right now. So it did go through the trial court. It was dismissed at the trial court level before even going through discovery at motion, I guess it's called at the motion to dismiss stage. So not where you go through the discovery and show your evidence and do all those things. So I was at the pleading stage.
Could you explain, before we get into all the legal proceeding, explain what your issue
the matter is? Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so ultimately what happened to me is as you could see, I am a Black woman. I worked at Rocket Mortgage from 2014 until I was officially terminated in 2023. So quite a bit of time. And at the time I was on a product management. I was a product manager of strategy and innovation. But the first part of my career, I was a mortgage banker that became a President's Club mortgage banker that quickly arose and had accolades and done really well with the company, ultimately moving into a business consulting position and then into this product manager of strategy and innovation. So small elite team that kind of works on the forefront of what's coming to the company. This was around the George Floyd time frame. Just to put people into perspective. So COVID, George Floyd, a lot of those things were happening when things started to arise. When people started saying we want to see more diversity in leadership and diversity in the company. So I raised my hand as someone that's well connected, and not just in Detroit, but across the nation, because I am a former Olympian. Went to college in Boston, have a degree also as well as from Eastern, a master's. So I started to refer people, right, that were more than qualified for a lot of the positions, and people were not getting calls back. So if you refer somebody, right, they're going to end up calling you because they know me. And then I'm like, well, let me try to figure out what's happening internally. So that kind of was like one of the first issues, right, like from a protected class standpoint. I started to then say, hey, after a while of then bringing this forward to the HR or talent development and them reaching out, they would give some excuse like, oh, well, we forgot or we dropped the ball, and then they will call them and then all of a sudden tell them they don't qualify. And so then I said, I put in writing. So this is what really triggered everything, because at some point in November of 2020, I believe this was November of 2020. I put in a letter saying, hey, as a company, we've said that we wanted to increase our diversity in these spaces. And then I gave actual scenarios. So I see you doing this to your head. I didn't know what I was doing once I put it on paper. At the time, I was naive. I just thought I was doing my job. We say we have an open door policy. We say we want everybody all hands on deck. And I was eager to say, let's try to fix it, right? Like, this is what we could do better. And that, I guess, wasn't really what I should have been doing. Because now I put it on paper that there was a problem. I was flagging a protected class wasn't being treated fairly. And I remember one of my leaders, he was no longer at the company. He left the company after, but he had said to me, you're trying to say, hey, company, here's a red flag, let's fix it. But the company's saying, no, you're the red flag, right? Like, you know, and you learn as you go. So that was one incident. Another incident is also around the same time. I was put on what's called a Black Wealth Gap Committee or Wealth Gap Committee, where I had read that doing some studies, I saw that African Americans had almost 1% higher interest rate than everyone else. And so I brought that attention in writing, right, to the team to say, hey, this is what I discovered, and maybe we should look at one of our loan products, FHA loans, to see how many more people are using one loan versus another. And in that scenario, same thing. I started getting messages from legal and different people, and I'm not even sure what's really happening, because I'm thinking like I'm doing my job, right? Like if there's an area and we could be unintentionally adding to the racial divide because we've raised our rates, then why wouldn't I bring that to our attention so we could fix it? And then that's when ultimately in a meeting, and this is a summary to everyone, so it's not, obviously it's a lot of years wrapped up. This is a summary of my perspective of what's going on. And I was pulled into a meeting with what I thought was to talk about the future of purchase, which is part of my job description. And in that meeting was the head of HR and the chief risk officer of the company. And they said they were saying that I was creating noise, and I said, well, what noise am I creating? And mind you, I'm blindsided because I thought it was just a one-on-one at this point, so I'm kind of aware. So I called it out in the meeting, and I said, or is this retaliation, right? And put my big girl panties on in the conversation, scared and nervous, but and I asked, and then that's when I started to put two and two together, because they mentioned November, and I'm like, November, and this meeting isn't happening in February. So I was like, they must be talking about what's going on with the referral stuff. And then they mentioned another meeting that I had. So then that's when I called out. I said, or since I'm in this meeting and we were supposed to talk about the future of purchase, let's talk about the fact that Blacks have a higher percent of interest rate than everybody else. And at that point, the chief risk officer raised his voice and said, Northover, this is what I'm talking about. If we as a company decide to raise our rates, that's what we're going to do. And if you continue down this path, it won't end well for you. So,
and what did you say at that point?
At that point, I paused, and I was kind of smirking, to be honest. In the moment, I was shocked and messaging my leaders on the side, because I'm like, what, WTF? Like, why am I in this meeting? And my personal HR person's not there. My leader is not there. This is like 3-4 levels above me, right? So why am I even having a conversation even about if I was in trouble for something, why am I having this with the chief risk officer, right? And didn't see it coming. Had a bonus 2 weeks prior to this, right? Like, achieved expectations on my review. So this was a blindsided moment.
And in addition to that, Zara, I mean, you said that for Black lenders, the percentage rate was 1% higher than the rest of the applicants for a loan. I know you said you mentioned it before, but when you mentioned that, what was their response? Because if he said this is all you're doing is creating noise, how did that conversation go on further once that statement was made? Because in a situation like that, you could bring something up, but it's also important to have receipts to prove what you're saying, to put them in a position to prove or disprove your claim or accusation or allegation?
Yeah, so there were emails sent, and because as a product manager, typically what happens behind the scenes is your work, like you might email the data team and you say, hey, can you pull the data to see how many more minorities or African Americans have an FHA loan? So we didn't even get as far as to ever do the data, right? Like this meeting happened before the execution of what we should have done in order to facilitate to see if there was a problem. So what did he say? He said, if you continue down this path, it won't end well for you.
That's what was said. Okay. Let me welcome the viewers right quick before we go on to, look, Alan has a question. Mr. 1213, Duella Boyce, Jill Sheridan, G Money Hollywood, Miss Sheila, Angela Browder. I want to welcome you all and Happy New Year to all, since this is the first time that I have been doing my show in 2026. So definitely Happy New Year and wish everyone a prosperous 2026. Alan, looked like you had a question.
I was curious. So your lawsuit is a racial discrimination suit. Is that?
So that's initially how it started off, as a race discrimination. And then ultimately what happened was, after I was threatened, do I have the card on me? After I was threatened, 2 weeks later, I received a card with a gorilla on the front. And inside
it was a birthday card, wasn't it?
Was it a birthday card? Okay.
Who is that from?
And it was signed by the former CEO, Jay Farner, and former COO, Bob Walters.
Wow.
So all within the C-suite, right? In Rocket, they call it the C-suite.
And what was explain that card? Was that a store-bought card, a homemade card?
It was a card that was mailed to me. So they sent out. There were other people that did receive the same card. So I can't say that it was only me that did receive the card. But typically, it's not like the whole company received that same card. It was a handful of people.
Black and white, or just black?
Huh?
Black and white recipients who
so this was one lawsuit, right? This was the first time I said, this is a problem. I'm bringing this suit forward. And so in that suit act itself had discovery, and that in that discovery in that suit, they addressed that it was more than one person that received that card. It was probably about like a couple hundred cards that were sent out to black and white, and around the same week as my birthday. I guess apparently different cards go out to like for a couple of days to the people that have a birthday in this week and that week. So that card was selected that week. That was dispersed to people that had birthdays around the same time that I did.
So it was a birthday card then?
It was a birthday card.
What was the message what was the theme of the card?
I'm trying to pull it up right now for you guys to see. So it said, the front of the card was a gorilla dressed up as a fortune teller with a card right on their head. And inside the card, it said, I see a great year. So if you could see that.
Okay.
So that's the birthday card itself. And then on the inside of the card, it said, Zara, I see a great year in your future, or bananas. It's unclear. Happy birthday anyway. Signed the former CEO and COO. And this is all public. This is part of the public record, so I can be able to share.
Well,
you shared it before, so yeah.
Yeah, when you got that, you thought did you think you were the only one who got it, and you thought?
So I filed an initial internal complaint. At the end of the day, I was the one that was threatened 2 weeks later, and the threat, it said, if you continue down this path, it won't end well for you. And then 2 weeks, my birthday comes around, and then that is the card. I've been at the company 7 years at that point, and I never received a card remotely cynical or like that, right? They're all, in fact, I actually have emails that I would send to Jay Farner and others saying, because I was that person that drank the Kool-Aids, go the company, read all the isms, lived, breathed the culture, right? Like, so I had thank you emails in regard. So they know that I take those things sentimentally. So when I received that card, I started crying. Like, instantly it was a gut punch, because a company that has done a documentary on you, that use your face, your likeness, that you've poured yourself into, that you've done how I can't even count how many speeches to empower new coming employees, current employees, to have gone from being threatened and all the microaggressions and actions and things that were leading up until that point to then now receiving this card 2 weeks later. I did send an email and they apologized internally with a response saying that they were getting rid of the vendor, that they're looking for a more diverse supplier. That was the response to when I called out the action of that card specifically.
And the statement, it won't end well for you, was that in the meeting with the HR person? Correct. And that's a question that one of the viewers asked, Mr. 1213, was the threat emailed to you, but that was in the meeting that you had with the HR person and someone from product management or?
The chief risk officer of the company.
Risk officer, okay. So that was in that meeting. When they said,
yep, so that was verbally said in the meeting, but it was written in terms of I immediately was writing my leader on the side, to my version of HR. So in Rocket, they call it TRS, which is Team Relations Specialist. So it was written in terms of I wrote it to people, but it was said to me in terms of verbalized in the meeting.
Oh, okay.
And so initially you had a lawyer. You worked with a lawyer on this initially, am I correct?
Correct. So what happens was that first lawsuit, I was still working, right? Like, didn't lose my job. Once I got the card, that hit different. I had requested to be transferred, right? Like I had requested to try to figure out what was going on, right? Like I was still, I could speak logically now about it, but in the moment, I'm stressed out. I'm confused. I'm tired. Like, right. Like I don't know what's happening or why it's happening. So I was fighting for them to investigate this. I reached out and I said, hey, this is a problem. Why am I getting an email basically that feels like a performance plan, right? Or a PIP when I don't even deserve to get one, right? So ultimately after all of those things, I ended up on my therapist took me out on mental leave. I was having panic attacks and not in a good state. And while I was on mental leave, it was then that I decided to try to go and file a claim with the EEOC. But the EEOC was backed up. Like the backlog was, so I filed the inquiry, but I was never able to get an appointment. So someone then had referred to me saying, hey, I have a friend that's a lawyer. Mind you, I probably should have looked to make sure that they were an employment lawyer and had done employment law cases, but that unfortunately was not the case with these lawyers that decided to to step in and help me out in that first case. So that case, I still had a job. I was filing for discrimination, right? And racial discrimination, but racial discrimination cases are very difficult, to prove, especially in that situation. So ultimately, what happened though was, go ahead.
So specifically, the allegations of racial discrimination ended up being what?
Dismissed.
Okay, that was dismissed. But in terms of what the actual allegations were, is there can you summarize in just a few sentences what the allegations were?
The allegations at that point were that I felt I was being racially discriminated because I was a Black woman that spoke up for protected activity, and ultimately, retaliated and discriminated against. That was the first lawsuit. So separate lawsuit, separate attorneys.
And the retaliation would have been, if you could explain that.
The retaliation would have been, racial and discrimination, retaliation, because that's where that case particularly was weak, right? Because I still had my job. I still, right. Nothing was there. So what happened was, while I was on leave, ultimately I came back from leave. I went back to Rocket. I went back to work. And that's when a new harm, right, took place. The same leader that threatened me, if you continue down this path, it won't end well for you, was responsible for dissolving my very small elite team when they found out I was coming back. So coming back from FMLA, approved FMLA.
You had less responsibilities?
So they dissolved the team altogether and sent me to work. I had a forced transfer, so they gave options. They said I could take a $9,000 severance package, go to a SOS team, and or go back to banking. So, I mean, in that situation, I have to make a decision. So I went back to banking thinking I would go back to purchase banking, which is what my specialty was, where I made, six figures, consistently in, where I was constantly awarded, where I was a documentary. But at that time, they put me in refinance banking, which at the time, market was 7-8% at this point. So you're putting me into refinance banking. You're not trained. I wasn't trained properly in refinance banking. It was acknowledged that he was the decision maker, right, in that discovery. Right. And so at that point, it's clear it's to remember where we are now. The first lawsuit did not have an EEOC claim, right, because I didn't get to go to EEOC. The judges, the lawyers at the time filed a claim against the company. The second lawsuit now, I went through the proper channels because I knew, right, the harm actually happened because I was now basically constructively demoted. And I, came back from FMLA and not given a job that was comparable to what I was making before. Dealt with a $20,000 pay cut. The threat actually came true, right? Like in this case. So I filed an EEOC claim, went through the proper channels to bring forth this new harm, and dealing with microaggressions and different things every day with being back in a firm, being back in a company when you now being retaliated for filing a lawsuit, right? Because I filed a lawsuit before. I was in the midst of a lawsuit and I still went back to the company, and now I'm being further retaliated. So that's where the attorneys before said, this is over. Basically, this is too much for us. So I appreciate them acknowledging that. They said you're better off going to get a second opinion. That's when I ended up with a different attorney that was recommended to me, that was an employment law attorney, who said that he saw the case, all the things. And when they had afforded me, the company from the very beginning tried to offer me a settlement amount, and I said I'm not signing away my silence. As a motivational speaker myself, as someone that's a former Olympian, I knew at this point that I'm so tired of us being oppressed because we're not able to talk about the stories that actually happen. So we went through the process. That case, now when we filed that case, this is the one that was dismissed at motion to dismiss. So the first phase at the pleading stage, because they tried to say it was res judicata, which means that basically this was too similar to the others and we should just amend and add it. However, the difference is with res judicata, this was new harm. And if you look at case law, there's case law that says when you have new harm, there's a policy. You're supposed to go through the EEOC if you're going to bring forth federal claims. And the first lawsuit never went through the federal claims. Never, and it was also a different harm. This was new harm that took place. So go ahead.
When you went back to work from FMLA, did they tell you in advance you would be going to a new department? Did they tell you would be receiving a pay cut, or they accepted you back from work based on the leave, and then they just sent you to another department?
The same week that the motion that was filed went moot was the same week that was a week that I was basically supposed to go back to work. So I was supposed to go back to work, let's say on the 14th, on the 10th, which is a Friday, they're calling and saying, hey, your team was dissolved and these are your options. And the whole team, and it wasn't a big team, it was a 5-person team. So there's some of the discrepancies here that you'll see if you read any of the cases for the briefings for the Court of Appeals or the Michigan Supreme Court will tell you that at one point the company said, when the judge dismissed, when the trial court dismissed, she said it was a 50-person team. I wasn't on a 50-person team, I was on a 5-person team. That's a big discrepancy to think that somebody would cut a 5-person team or a 50-person, right? Like a 50-person team or a 5-person team to have collateral damage. So go ahead.
So one of the things they should have done, I'm putting my HR hat on, one of the things they should have done when the FMLA was approved, There should have been a meeting then, go over, your leave and all that. And the one statement they should have made to you, and you can verify to us if they did or not. The one statement they should have made to you is that we can guarantee you a job. We cannot guarantee you'll come back to that same position. Sounds like what they did was they waited until they knew you were coming back. Then they dissolved the department. So from my standpoint, that appears to be retaliation. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an employment lawyer, but it appears to be retaliation because they should have told you, number one, in advance, and it's just too coincidental upon your return. They dissolved the department, put you somewhere where it's harder for you to make a equitable living that you were making prior to going on leave. So they did some things wrong based on what I'm hearing. And I did read some of the case. It's still to be decided by the Michigan Supreme Court. We'll get to that part as well because the decision you filed, and there should be a decision coming soon. But yeah, from an HR standpoint, and I know Deborah Gordon. I even told you about Deborah Gordon, and she would have loved to take this case from the beginning, I'm sure. So from an HR standpoint, they made some mistakes.
That's ultimately one of the important things now that I try to, like, I've since all of this, I have done a TED Talk called "We Are Worth the Cost of Justice," right? Because ultimately we're just not knowledgeable. You don't graduate from college and they teach you, hey, this is what discrimination, retaliation, all these things are, and this is exactly what you're supposed to do, and how you fight it if it happens to you. We're not taught that. So I didn't know. You don't know, like, how deep to find the proper employment law for you, right? Like, these are not things that are talked about. And then when you go to other people, whether even mentors or people that work in companies, some either have never encountered that situation before, or the ones that have, that signed an NDA, can't say nothing to you, right? Like, so you're really at a loss. And it's at a time when you're at your most vulnerable, because I'm able to talk about it clearly now because I'm 5 years removed from it, from the situation. But in the moment, it's a whirlwind that's taking place. But
so
yes,
you've been gone from the company for five years.
Well, I've been gone from the company since 2023, but the lawsuit started the action started from 2020, right? But the lawsuit itself the first lawsuit was filed in 2021.
2020. And so you left, and how did you end up leaving? How was
I was terminated. So there is actually more than one lawsuit taking place at the same time. But I was ultimately terminated.
And what did they tell you on your termination?
That my performance wasn't my performance. They fired me because of performance.
And was there a severance? Did you receive a severance?
I actually inquired about receiving I inquired about receiving the severance. And they told me that I wasn't eligible because of my performance.
Whoa. I've never
heard. But your performance, you have all your performance reviews. You got exceeds expectations and all that, right?
It was exceeds expectations before the retaliation started.
Right.
Once the retaliation started, it was. I mean,
right.
Yeah. Like I had disputed. I had filed an internal complaint. It was a constant once I went back internally, having to plead my case. This is retaliation. This is a problem while still working. Right. Like, I should have never received the letter that I received in the first place once again. But at that point, what are you going to do? You go to HR and you go to the EEOC and you just file the claim because that's where we were.
And Alan, can you read this comment? And then, because you're in the media, been in the media for a while, award-winning journalist.
It says, Eric, were you aware that Dan Gilbert to date has directed his security to profile and remove American Africans or Black patrons from the lobby inside the First National Building in downtown Detroit? And let's be clear that his security has not removed one single white person to date from the building, and there is secret video that exists to prove Gilbert's actions now. Where is the outrage and reporting from the local media about this? This is the first I've heard of it. I think I would guess I would guess there would be no directive in writing, or I'd be surprised if Dan Gilbert said it that way, in a way that could be. But I've never worked for. I've had limited encounters with Dan Gilbert. I mean, it's certainly an interesting thing. I mean, if there's some proof of that, then that's pretty outrageous, and the media should certainly be on it. I guess the question is, I'm a little skeptical that it's said in that way. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. The end result isn't that, but I find it hard to believe you'd say, well, make sure Black people aren't lounging here because we're in the city of Detroit. I mean, it's
Well, do you, Alan, do you remember there were years ago, and this is while I was still working at the company, I want to say it was around 2016, when there was a banner put up in the city of Detroit, because a public apology was given, but there was a billboard that was put up where it says, "This is the new Detroit." And there wasn't a Black person on that, and that you could Google. Like,
it's funny you mentioned that, Zara. I was on a show last night, and we talked about that last night. I know it was, Gilbert was involved. I forgot the advertisement company, BDO. Is it BDO or something like that, Alan? The advertising company that was involved with that?
I remember, but Deadline Detroit, I remember we did.
Yeah, you did a story on that.
When that came out, because there were just all white people, and they were saying that there was some backlash from that. So, I mean, obviously that's a blind side. I mean, you're in the city of Detroit. You're putting out an advertising like that. It's not a very good message, and I would imagine that would help your lawsuit if you say, hey, well, but so you were dismissed. Well, Eric, you're in you've been in human resources. Is it, to me, it's surprising to hear that somebody can be denied severance because of performance. I understand you can get fired for performance, but I didn't understand that you can actually be denied severance because of performance.
Severance is up to the company to
ethical or something criminal that's happened where then they can deny it. But
severance is up to the company to make a decision on, Alan. We don't have to offer severance to individuals. Decision is usually made between the HR department and the vice president of that division, as well as the labor. Most companies have a labor lawyer on staff, and they make a decision. And usually, so the good thing about severance, usually someone gets a severance package. The termination also includes the rehire check of yes. That's usually what happens. If you are relieving someone of their duty as well as giving them severance, chances are you checking the box: are they rehireable, eligible for rehire? The answer would be yes. But listening to Zara, I read some of it. I can say, from my professional opinion, there definitely were some mistakes made. The tone deafness of sending out a birthday card with a gorilla on it, that was wrong. But then the bananas part in the card was handwritten, right, Zara?
No, it's not. It was printed.
Oh, it's printed. Oh, okay. I thought it was handwritten, but
it was a printed card that was sent out. I mean, to be honest, if as much as I've learned now going through this process, right, and going to the UDM law library and all those things, like, even with the second attorney that had came on board, right, it probably should have been, right, it either should have been delayed as to when the case was filed, right, at first, and probably should have just been retaliation, because I've learned that racial discrimination is a very difficult, thing to potentially lead with. Where we are now, though, the case that is before the Supreme Court is a retaliation claim, and the questions the main questions before, though, is a due process thing. Because I was at the pleading stage, right? Like the second lawsuit, I had pled my case. I checked off the box that I'm a Black woman that experienced, retaliation. The protected activity was I filed a lawsuit, right? And so I advocated and spoke up for myself. The new harm was $20,000 pay cut, transfer to a role that's not comparable. Like to what I was making before, microaggressions, the list goes on. And at that stage, if you look at case law that's been around from the test of time, whether it's Burlington or El Cahil or like some of these older, newer and older case laws, at the pleading stage, that should have been moved forward to discovery. What happened was there was case 1 and case 2 were actually being tried at the same time. So like the judges, it was like an hour apart, but it was the same judge for both cases.
So what was it, in circuit court or probate court or?
It was Third Circuit.
Third Circuit. It was in the city council building.
So I think what happened was where the mistake was the error. That's before the Supreme Court that said is that like this was at the pleading stage. You tried to use the discovery from the first case to dismiss the second case. So you can't go and say, well, the company said it was a business decision. So now the terms that they used was they dismissed it under motion a C8 and C7, and then tried to substitute it for a C10.
Well, let me ask you, because we're not familiar with.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, so
too legal for us. But let me ask you. Obviously, you've got to file motions and pleadings and all that. Is somebody are you getting some legal guidance, or you just figure it all on your own?
Thank God for ChatGPT, the law library, God himself. I mean, I really spent hours. Like I moved into the library. Like I learned the law. I fact checked everything that I read that came through because I'm aware that ChatGPT obviously couldn't just do it, right? Like because they'll sometimes give you a fake case law. They'll sometimes give you, but it at least gives someone that has knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. That has sense it allowed me to look this stuff up and learn, right? Like, so I taught myself, and I had an attorney up until, once I was finally terminated and the company offered me money again. And I said, I'm not signing my silence away. Then ultimately that attorney said, well, if you don't take it, I'm not going to represent you anymore. So then at that point, I decided, I'm not going to sign my silence away. It was at this stage, we're waiting to hear from the Court of Appeals. And I thought the briefing and all that stuff was done, but it wasn't. So when he decided to withdraw, that's when I decided to write my briefs and plead. And then I made it to oral argument. I survived their motion to strikes, and we're still standing.
What was that amount, the last amount that they offered that you refused to accept?
I can say actually because I wrote it in my brief, so it's public record. But they offered $80,000.
Okay, and Mr. 1213, he's commenting on what Part Or said, and I don't think that Gilbert would openly say that, which he probably did not openly say that. And I'm not.
Oh, Gilbert, remember, it wasn't Dan Gilbert that threatened me. It was Bill.
No, they talking about what Part Or said about not allowing blacks, African Americans in the building, and he wouldn't say that openly. I don't think. I get what Part Or is saying. I also get what Mr. 1213 is saying. So I also want to welcome Day Go Blue to the show. And Mr. 1213, I was on the Bryce is Right. That's the show I was on last night. And it's also on StreamYard. It was recorded. I'm not sure what platform it was recorded on, maybe YouTube or Facebook. Then Jill Sheridan, who's a regular viewer, she's asking the question, did the person who wrote the card get called as a witness during your trial? That initial card. But that initial trial was dropped, right? That was dismissed, right?
Never went to trial.
With the trial, right? It was dismissed. That's what I'm asking.
That was dismissed. To be honest, the person that wrote the person that the signature was in the card, neither of those individuals are at the company anymore.
Okay. And then G Money. Go ahead, Alan.
I was going to ask real quickly, how much did you end up spending on legal fees?
You said how much did I end up spending?
Yeah.
I mean, technically they were contingent, so I haven't spent anything. I've spent money. I've spent money on like printing and and I'm still spending money now. I mean, I've spent thousands. I mean, I've spent a couple thousand.
But attorneys retained you on a contingency fee. That
the first two attorneys that contained me on the attorneys contained me on a contingency, and But since then, since I do have, because there are two cases, so that's why I said there's two cases simultaneously happening. There's one that I am representing myself, but then there is a wrongful termination case that's taking place, and there is an attorney that supports that case. So there's a lot going on in this scenario, and but we're still here. So we're 16 weeks. As we await to hear a response from the Michigan Supreme Court. And it's clear to say, because one thing that you had touched base on, Eric, when you said, well, did they tell me basically they were dissolving the team and go through basically a process? one of the things that came up in the trial court where the attorney that represented me prior to leaving, he said, Your Honor, if you believe that he said, I basically told him in that first case, right? Show us where you've decided to get rid of dissolve the team, right? Like show the evidence, right? Like there was no evidence, right? There was no evidence that I was performing bad, or there was no evidence that my team was being dissolved. Or at least we don't know, right? Because there was no discovery in the second lawsuit.
Okay.
The Supreme Court. So that's the reason why they had if he said, I remember in discovery, he said, I will cut this lawsuit right now if you show that this was basically you pre-planned, right? Like, and nothing was shown. The lawyer himself also even said to the trial court judge, Your Honor, if you believe these cases should be merged, then merge them, because a trial court judge does have the opportunity to be able to do that as well, to merge a case that they believe should be consolidated. So neither of those things were done, and part because the case was not right. What in terms, the case wasn't right. It didn't go through the EEOC process. That's like going to the to break it down in terminology. It's like going to say I'm learning how to drive, but I'm just going to go out here and drive without getting a driver's license, right? Like there's a process that you're supposed to go through, take the test, take driver's ed, do all the things, and then get the license to
permit and the license, right?
So in the defense for me with the retaliation claim and overcoming res judicata, you're supposed to file a claim. You're supposed to file an EEOC claim in order for you to have what's a case that you can bring forth federal claims. I never had an EEOC claim for that first lawsuit. So the second lawsuit, I did everything I was supposed to do, and then you're penalizing me for doing everything that the law says I'm supposed to do.
So this comment by G Money Hollywood, and I'm not sure if he's referencing Quicken Loans or Rocket Mortgage. He talks about a white woman that he knows that got a home loan for 4.25% rate with a 620 credit score, 5% down. Then his black friend went through the same bank and had a 773 credit score with 25% down, but was given a 4.8% rate. So this sounds similar to what you stated earlier about a higher rate given to blacks versus whites over at Rocket Mortgage. And to be honest, I'm not saying based on what G Money wrote, I'm not in any way indicting Rocket Mortgage. He just presented an example about what goes on in the industry, in the bank lending industry for mortgage loans.
I've got a question. So tell us a little bit about your Olympic background, and also how did Rocket Mortgage use that to promote? Did they use that to say, hey, we've got this Olympic person, or tell us a little bit about that, and did that play a role at all in you doing well at first or anything like that? I'm curious.
Actually, so there's a couple things. So I competed I'm a dual citizen. I competed for Jamaica in the shot put. I was born here in Florida, but both my parents are Jamaican. So I went to the 2008 Olympic Games. We talked about it briefly last time, but I applied almost 77 times to work at Rocket Mortgage. I wasn't hired on my first go round. It actually came down to me hearing that Dan Gilbert was going to be, back then it was called the M1 rail, but it's a Q line now. But I went to an event and I literally ran after Mr. Gilbert and I was like, "Hey, Mr. Gilbert, my name is Zara. I've been applying to your company." and at that point he told me, he said, "You're the exact energy that we need." Those were his words to me.
When I first met you, Zara, when I first met you at the Eastern Michigan University at an event for the former athletic director, Dr. Gregg, I think at that point you told me you were going to be working, you hadn't applied yet, but you said you're going to be moving to Detroit, you're going to be working for Rocket Mortgage. So you talked it into existence, but I had no idea it was 77 times that you applied.
And so that's where a lot of that came from, was the persistence, because my first year, once I finally did get hired in, and I talked about that internally with the company too, I said, ultimately it came down to I referred someone else into the company and put my name as the person that referred the person when we were doing their application. And then he ended up referring me and getting money, getting paid. And I had already applied dozens of times. That's how I even found out. So at that point I had changed my address changed because I finally moved to Detroit. Right. But so then that's when I was just like, well, if my name is the same, the phone number, like I had a different number, had a different address. So I think the system might have gotten confused and then probably just allowed me to go through the process. So when I interviewed, I remember telling the interviewer, the leader at the time, like I woke up this morning like I was preparing for the Olympics. And I said, I told him I belong here. I said, I belong here. And the first thing I said to him when I walked into that room, and he looked at me, he said, I can make you into a star. And then I got hired on the spot. And I remember the talent development person at the time saying, he never hires people on the spot, right? Like, so I had a very successful career, but I worked my ass off. Like, I remember at one point I got pulled into the room and they told me I was working too much. And you don't really even hear that at Rocket on a Quicken Loans back then at the time. Like I had a goalpost that kept moving though. I started to notice things that were happening, right? That were different for me than other people. But the athlete in me, doesn't give up. Like the athlete in me was still going to hit the target. I made over 150,000, right? Like, I sold $40 million in loans in 1 year, right? Like, and I was doing speaking engagements. I was flying to DC and doing, basically commercials and or PSAs, and my picture was, if you Google me today in Rocket, you're going to see pictures of, like, some pictures still might be there, at over 115 social proof reviews that they ended up taking down, right? Like, so I came in like an athlete, and that's actually what was said. They did a whole 10-minute video. Who invests that type of money, right? Like with the Olympics in the beginning, my mom was in the video, and they would send that out to new hires. They would send it out to people that, to watch. Leaders would use that to motivate their teams.
There's a comment here. Let me read this. It says, Eric, Allen is gaslighting. Clearly, Dan Gilbert and his organization is bad for Detroit. And didn't we just state that there was a secret video of Gilbert's security profiling? So what is wrong with your co-host this evening? Look, if there's some proof of this, if you say there's a secret security video, I'd love to see it and love to see what it shows. I'm not denying it. I'm just saying, if somebody says that Dan Gilbert told the security guards, make sure you get rid of black people in the lobby, I'm a little skeptical of someone saying that in the city of Detroit. I've worked downtown for years, so I'm not saying there's not some discrimination there. I'm not denying that one way or another. I don't know, but I'm just saying the way it's presented. And as far as Dan Gilbert being bad for Detroit, well, I think you're not the only person to have a negative experience with Rocket Mortgage. Certainly there are other people. I have a friend who worked for Rocket Mortgage who had a negative experience, and really was, for age discrimination. He had some issues there. And so I'm not saying that, but on the other hand, Dan Gilbert's, I think you can't deny the contribution that he's made to downtown Detroit. And I don't know if you have a feeling about that, Zara, or...
Oh, me. So at the end, because we keep bringing Dan Gilbert, but remember, my lawsuit, Dan Gilbert's not the one that threatened me, right? My lawsuit is yes, he owns the company, but I was threatened by Bill Banfield, the chief risk officer, right, of the company, who technically does report. I think in the hierarchy, I think he does report to Dan Gilbert, but that was also around the same time when Dan Gilbert had the stroke. Right. Like, so that is something that people have to take into consideration. He wasn't there. I personally believe that the atmosphere of the company did change, right, when he had the stroke, because he wasn't as present and involved as much as he was. The things that I remember, right, or I have emails from Dan Gilbert saying that, right, like wishing me well and telling me I'm doing a good job. And I had tons of realtors and different people that would write him on my behalf, right? Like, so I was in a position that Great things were happening. It's one of those things where I wonder, does he know now? I would assume he knows now, right? But
I'm sure he knows now. I mean, he's a face.
I would assume he knows now, but I don't, I don't know. Like, I don't, I am a little surprised. Like, it's not like it was publicized. Like, it's not like anybody's really talking about it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so, but I also get it because when you have an entity that's valued at $32 billion that donates money to a lot of these different spaces, and like from NAACP to all the things, like, people are going to be more skeptical on talking about something, and bringing attention to it, I guess.
In situations like this, there's a reason why it's not talked about. I mean, the perception has done a lot for the city. I know and Alan, you might remember this because, the newspapers were writing about it when the decision was made to come to Detroit. Yeah, a lot of employees were saying, I don't know if I want to go to Detroit and, all that. So they even had a problem with thinking that enough employees even come down to Detroit. And then after that, that's when, remember, they put in place the if you buy or rent or purchase a home, condo, you got a bonus for doing all that, or at least a stipend to help assist you with your house. But there's a lot of things that's been said. You could talk to 100 people since 2000, whenever you first got down here to Detroit. You're going to have some positives and negatives. But one of the things that he has to own is that what you talked about earlier, Zara, I think, Alan, you talked about it, with regards to that advertisement. I mean, that just didn't sit well with a lot of people. And it's ironic that it came up on the show yesterday. One of the guests he's originally from Detroit, but he lives in Charlotte, North Carolina now. That's one of the first things he talked about when the host was talking about the image of Detroit moving forward. And you still have the crime, you still have the problems with schools and things of that nature. And people have to understand that the power players are the power players. They make the decisions. When you have a city that's, has a poverty issue, the citizens are not the ones running the city. So he's the face of Detroit. I mean, you have a mayor, but he has done what Little Caesars is the Illages, but for campus marches, the Q line, which was originally M1 line. I mean, a lot of that, he get credit for that, even though the Q line should be going all the way to Pontiac, if you ask me. Hopefully they make it out that far because it's not doing any. And I'm not sure what it's doing because it's all free now, isn't it, Alan? Isn't it Q line free?
It's free, as is the purpose as well. Yeah.
So, but he has, there's a lot to be said about what he has done in Detroit, positively, negatively. Same with Cleveland. You have some people from Cleveland. They have negative opinions about him. They have positive opinions about him. But that's when that type of money, that type of power, you're always going to have criticism. You're always going to have blind loyalty too, unfortunately.
Here's the ad. That was the ad, I think, originally that ran. Let me just get rid of this.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, let me just get rid of that.
Well, what was the Alan? What was the marketing firm? For some reason it escapes me. BDO or something. Oh man, what's the name of that company?
I'm looking at the story right now. Blah blah blah. Bedrock, Detroit Loco. Blah blah blah. Not sure what.
Because I don't think the advertising company is headquartered in Detroit either.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I know that they do have it. They have
probably changed since then.
They haven't. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it might change since then too.
Outside, but they also have an outside. I mean, an internal marketing department that does promotions and ads and stuff like that. But I don't know if it was outside or it could be. I'm sure a company like Rocket spends a lot of money on marketing.
Oh, they do, yeah. So Par Orders has a suggestion for you, Zara. He asking you to go grab yourself a copy of Arturo Arthur Schomburg's article, "The Negro Digs Up His Past." Then you will understand that whether it's Banfield or Gilbert, they're all on the same team, especially in Detroit.
I will grab it and read it. I mean, anytime someone has given me, I can say this, what's been helpful through this process, are individuals that give a piece of advice, whether it's the clerk on the way to the security clerk that just says good job and look this up, or the clerk at the Court of Appeals office that gives me a book, like the read this before you file a claim. I can say I have been blessed to meet good people along the way that see that I'm diligently working hard, whether it's a librarian that's sending me in the right direction to read how to file a proper motion. It's been a journey, but I'm just grateful I've been in a position to help so many other people, because it's not just me. There's been many people from the company and other companies that now have reached out and have either been able to negotiate a proper severance. So you are right, Alan. People can have bad performance and still get a severance package, because I've personally seen it. because they also knew how to advocate for themselves, because I've been able to tell them to call out the things that they needed to call out, right? There's this process. At some point, you start to see that, our ancestors fought so I could fight, right? And I had a choice to make. I either was going to be a part of the oppressor and not do anything and not look anything up and not continue to advocate for myself, or I was going to be, right, an advocate for the oppressed. And I chose the latter, right? I chose to stand up. I chose to fight back. And I'm just so proud to still be standing. It's 16 weeks. And for those that don't necessarily know the law, that for those that haven't gone to the Michigan Supreme Court before, when you look this stuff up, a quick denial typically comes in the first 2 to 8 weeks, right? If they're not interested at all, no written, no nothing, there's no reason for them to keep it. So it shows that at least there's deliberation happening. I don't know one way or the other where it's going, but I know that there was a retired judge out of Massachusetts that filed an amicus brief for me. So it's like a friend of the court basically saying, here are some of the things that I see that were errors, that were wrong at the trial court level. Here are some of the due process issues that I saw, and that was accepted. That was granted at the application stage. That does not have to be granted at the application stage.
Are you hoping that it gets kicked back to the court and you get a full trial? Is that the ultimate?
I'm hoping that it's either, at this stage, anything would be a huge blessing. If it's granted review, that means I'm written into law. I'm already written into law, but if this gets granted review, less than 3% of cases ever even get granted review, let alone by a pro se litigant, someone representing themselves. Right? Less than 3% of the cases go back to, less than 3% get granted, that get kicked back to the Court of Appeals or the trial court. But of course, that would be the win. That would be the hope. That would be victorious in God's name, because that's them affirming that there was an error, that there was an error here. And you needed
not just an error, but discrimination. But just so you know, Zara, you've already won, because you have provided other people to open their mouth and speak. And it always takes one person, because oftentimes people have a fear of being fired. They join in on a situation like this. But now that you have spoken, this, good, bad, or indifferent, if Gilbert and his people are listening, I don't work for them, but at the end of the day, there will be others, I can assure you, that will probably come forward, because your case is a stepping stone. Someone always have to be the guinea pig in situations like this. It's no different than sexual assault cases. It takes one person to finally look at Cassie. Had it not been for Cassie, Sean, his situation would have never come to light the way it did. Other people start talking. So one person has to be the person to open up that lid on the can. And then once it's open, the carbonation is there for a minute, but it will quickly dissolve into to being nothing. And it's unfortunate it took this, but someone had to speak up, and you were that person.
Thank you. And I've already started writing the book, and the cost of justice, because this was a cost. But my biggest thing through all of this is I really just I hope for, for people to be educated moving forward on what their rights are. to just know the difference, to even, because even if you have a lawyer, even if you have a phenomenal lawyer, one, it's still a scary situation to go through. It's still very stressful. And half the time you don't even understand what your lawyer is telling you, right? Like you're just going with the flow because you don't really know. And I'm hoping that by the end of this, I could at least take the complex and make it somewhat simplistic for people to have a better understanding, and that could make some change.
Right. 1 second, Alan. I wanted to say this because I meant to text you this, Zara, because Park Orr said something I meant to text you about, because I was talking to another lawyer and they told me to let you know to start referring to yourself as counsel pro se. And that's what that's what Park Orr just said. I meant to text you that before earlier today. Go ahead, Alan. Sorry about that, Alan.
Question. Where are you now in terms of what are you back in Florida? Or are you
I'm in Detroit. I live in Detroit. Yeah, okay. I live in Detroit. So I live here. I consult here. I do still have family back in Jamaica. Thank God they are okay. And I have family all over. And but yeah, this has been a consumption of, it's been a part of my life. I've still lived in the midst of this storm. I've still done things. I actually recently got engaged.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good things happen even in storms,
Yep, exactly. And Alan, you asked, it's the same thing. There's still a lot of people that have great careers at Rocket. It's right. A lot of great things still happen just because, and this is what I want to normalize, just because, yes, I had a bad encounter and it should be, the person should be held accountable, but it doesn't mean that the, 25 other thousand people
the same experience
that had the same experience and should, so people should be held accountable for their actions. And that's where we are. Like one of the isms, their own isms, right, that they say is not a matter about what is right. It's not a matter of who is right. It's a matter of what is right. And the who wasn't right in this situation, right? And the what needs to be taken all the way to the Supreme Court at this point and be corrected. So that's where we are. I do have more. I have evidence, right? Like I have discovery, and there's discovery that they would have to show. So yes, I do hope that this goes back to the trial court. We go through the process, we get to a jury, because that is a question that I am asking myself now. And I'll put this out there so, others that are listening too, because it's something at some point you have to say, well, what happens when the number changes, right? What happens when they're really like, we want to put this to rest. We don't care if you don't have to sign the NDA. Do you want it to be over? At one point, right? Like you might think, no, absolutely not. Because remember, the last thing that would be affirmed would be what the trial court and the Court of Appeals said. And I don't want to close that window for any other constituent or person that's coming after me, that's fighting a lawsuit. Like, I don't want that to be the last thing. So of course the plan is to go either way. I go all the way. If it's
right, you don't want to set that precedent.
If it's a denial with a consent or a dissent, that's a blessing, because I will take that to the U.S. Supreme Court. So I plan on going all the way. And if it's a remand or a partial remand or a partial review or a review, then that's a blessing, because how many counsel pro se litigants make it this far, so I do see this as a win-win situation. I'm very proud of myself. It's been tiring as hell, but it's possible, right? And that's what I want to show people, that it is possible. Over almost 1,250 people have signed a petition because they want to, they see themselves in this. It's bigger than me at this point. It's a statewide significant issue.
On that note, you have another question, Alan?
No. Well, yeah, I do. So you're consulting now? Is that what
I do? Consult, yes. Business development
consultant. What do you consult on?
Huh? I'm a business development consultant at Hamilton Anderson, an architectural firm.
Okay, cool.
So if you're
I'm going to thank you, Zara. Wish you the best of luck with this case, with your engagement, and we stay in touch because we've been knowing each other for a while. So we will continue to pray for you that you have a good result. And again, like I said, I can't tell you what to do, but my suggestion would be to take it all away, because you've already set the precedent, and you don't want the precedent to end before an end result comes. That's fine with you, so I would not settle just to end it. I will only want an end result that you are comfortable with and that you can live with. And I want to thank you, Alan, for joining me this evening as co-host. All the viewers, I want to thank you all for joining us. You came in at the end, Karen Winston, but thanks for coming on. Appreciate you all, Ms. Rainey and everyone else. Until next week, be blessed. Enjoy 2026. Be safe, and let this be a more prosperous year than the previous years were to you. Good luck to everyone. Peace and love. And until next time.
Fireworks for the compliment.
You know, so he said, yeah, nice medallion.
It says faith fueled. So they know, I mean, I'm in this. It's the legal emblem, and it says faith fueled because that's my reminder. That's what's fueling me.
All right.
Oh, good comment. Thanks.
Good luck. Good luck.
All right. Good luck and good night.
Thank you, and I'll keep you guys posted.
All right. Thanks again, Alan.